This is Jughead, as usual, and before we begin today, I want to thank our newest patron at Patreon, Ryan Singer. You too can become a patron for us if you go to the site www.jugheadsbasementpodcast.com and then see where it says Patreon and a little button there. You can press that and join our $2, $5, or $10 tiers, and you get special little goodies and emails for me and shit like that. If you can't afford that, you can do a one-time payment. On that same page, you should see a link for PayPal, and you can press that. It'll guide you towards giving a donation. If that doesn't work for you, you can actually go to PayPal directly and just give some money to jugheadsbasement@gmail.com. Once again, if you can't afford to help out in that way, share the podcast or write a review. It would be really helpful too. I love doing this, and I'd love to keep doing it for you. Hello, it's a winter wonderland in Jughead's basement. Actually, outside Jughead's basement. So welcome to episode 54 of Jughead's Basement's subcategory Lo-Fi Interviews with Hi-Fi Guests. Right now you are listening to Double Whiskey Coke No Ice by Dillinger 4 on their album Midwestern Songs of the Americas, put out in 1998 by Hopeless Records. This week you get Paddy Costello from Dillinger 4 and also from The Arrivals. We talk about what it means to be an artist and if we consider ourselves to be artists. We talk about touring and songwriting and specifically the naming of songs for Dillinger 4. And also we talk about found clips and audio bites. Come along on our journey, and here we go with Patrick Costello.
Yeah, it's funny. This is my, oh God, you have a pizza on my head, don't I?
You do have a pizza on your head.
This is my inaugural Zoom. I've never Zoomed before.
Well, congratulations.
Well, I hate to admit it, but I couldn't wrap my head around it on my computer. So I actually had to go get Hollis out of bed. You know, Zoom you do every day. Can you show me how to do that? God, all right.
Yeah, well, you know, we're what are we, like the last generations, or our generations are the last ones that didn't grow up with computers, right? You know?
Right, totally. And actually, the funny thing is, even within our generations, I haven't realized until the last 10 years just what a caveman I am. I mean, it's crazy to me what even my contemporaries already take for granted. I have no idea what I'm doing. I think I had an iPhone for probably 2 years before I even wrapped my head around what an app was. To me, it was like the handheld YouTube machine, you know.
Yeah.
But
well, app means application. If you didn't cue into that, we are getting older, as they say. It's really great. We're like in basements. My last few interviews we've all been in basements. I'm in my basement. It looks like you're in your basement. That's correct, right? It looks like a basement.
I am. Yeah, this is kind of my. I have to be honest with you. I'm not a pro at doing podcasts. So out of the ones I've listened to, they almost seem like quizzes on times you went to and band names or whatever. So I'm actually doing here. This is my record collection, is all to the left. So if I'm in a pinch, I can just dash over here and look up a date or a time.
I see. Well, I'm a sort of absent-minded interviewer and interviewee, so it's fine. I also have a computer screen here too, so we could look up something together, and I could edit out that pause if need be.
No, I was just about to say, it's really funny because I know we met in passing at the Triple Rock the one time, but I don't know if you remember this because I was a little tuned up that night. But I actually met you in passing a long time ago when I was a kid. We actually met in passing at was that Dirty Nelly's?
Yeah, in the Palatine.
Very long time ago. It's how I found out about Screeching Weasel. I was with a from Evanston, and he had met a girl that he was really into, and she was at a show. So he asked me if I would go out there with him so he could see her. And you guys just happened to be on the bill. I don't even think you guys were headlining. And like kind of met in passing that night.
What's my best thing to call you? Paddy, Patrick, Pat?
It kind of doesn't matter, but I guess predominantly at this point it's Paddy or Patrick.
Everyone I run into calls you Paddy, but I think I'll call you Patrick.
Only one I hold in reserve is Pat. And I'll tell you why. It has to do with bartending. I'm giving away my game here. But if someone asks my name at the bar while I'm working, that guy or gal comes up to the bar. Hey, guy. Hey, what's your name? What's your name? If I got to move quick, I say, I'm Pat. Because everybody at work who comes up and goes, oh, this is my guy. This is Pat. Hey, Pat. Hey, Pat. Then I know I did not meet you in a very cool way. You're already kind of telling what category of customer you are if you come up and you tell me Pat. Now, I've kind of given that away now, but whatever. It's been 20 years.
Well, hopefully none of those drinkers at that bar will know what a podcast is.
It'll be interesting to find out who does catch it.
Yeah. What I was just going to ask you is, and this wasn't even on my list, but you do seem to have like an odd connection to Chicago, even though you're from the Minnesota area. Did you start going down to Chicago when you were younger, or what's your story before bands?
Well, actually, Eric from D4 and I, we're both from Evanston.
Oh, okay.
He was actually born and raised in Evanston. I was born in New York, and we moved to the Chicago area. I know it sounds weird to say, but I don't even know exactly. I was a kid. But we ended up in Evanston. I always tell people I'm from Evanston. By the time I was a cognitive individual, we were already in Evanston. Like, I think we moved to Evanston when I was maybe like 8, if I had to harbor a guess. But yeah, I lived there till I was about 16 or so.
And that was a family move to Minnesota then, I guess?
No, I actually ended up going. I'm painting with broad strokes here with every move, I feel like. Coincidentally, Eric from D4 and I, who both went to Evanston Township High School together, were both asked to leave Evanston Township High School within the same week or two. We weren't very good kids. I can't speak to his story, but with mine, I didn't really get like kicked out of ETHS. It was just basically they had a special program they wanted to put me into. My mother found it questionable. And we had an old family friend that was a headmaster of a boarding school. She went to him just for advice because my test scores were really good. I was just a knucklehead. And to make a really long story short, he basically said, well, is he a big kid? My mom said, yeah. He said, does he play football? My mom said, well, I know he likes watching it. And he said, was he a tough kid? My mom said, yeah. So I ended up going to the school on like a football scholarship, which was funny because I hadn't played football since I was like probably 9 at that time. I basically got the boot, and Eric, I think he had a similar situation, but we both left ETHS around the same time. But from when I went to that school, which was in northern Indiana, if I ever did live in Evanston or the Chicago metropolitan area again, it would be for like a month or two at a time. Because I ended up going to school for a year in Green Bay later. I just kind of bounced around the Midwest a lot.
It's warming up to seem like a really interesting relationship between you and Eric, because you've bounced around from different places together, or just happenstance, or what?
My mother was always still in Evanston. So, like I would come back and stuff. And, Eric and I were in Billingsgate together in Chicago when we were kids. And when I got sent away to school, I got the boot out of the band, of course, because I wasn't really around. But I would still roadie for them, like in the summers when they would go out on tour and stuff. And I still went to shows in Chicago, like constantly. Whenever I could get back to Chicago, I was still going to shows like all the time,
See, I'm learning about the band. So are you the only one there? Is Eric not in Minnesota?
Oh no, Eric's in Minnesota.
He ran the bar, the Triple Rock, right? Yeah. So
yeah, I suppose I am making this very confusing, aren't I?
Well, that's good because I don't know, fake news, real news, the past, the present,
Or
it's all cloudy.
you know what it was? He and I both, to make it easier, he and I both had met at Evanston Township High School. Well, actually, I was already in Billingsgate. He joined it a little bit after we had started, but just barely after we had started. And we were in that band together for a couple of years. He ended up going to a different school in Evanston. So he stayed in Billingsgate, and he was the primary songwriter, to be honest with you. I ended up going to a boarding school in Northern Indiana. So I got the boot out of the band, but we were all still friends. There were guys in that band that are still friends of mine to this day. And then later, I went to school in Green Bay, and he went to college in St. Paul, Minnesota. I got asked to leave the school I went to in Green Bay.
It's a pattern.
I got asked to leave, and Eric was like, "You should come here, and we should start a band. We should start a different group." I was like, "Cool." And I came here, and that's basically what D4 ended up becoming.
Oh, cool. That's actually a nice story. So you two have been known each other for a long time then.
Yeah, since we were, I was actually just telling my wife a couple of days ago because she found a photo of what was technically the first real show Billingsgate ever played. And it was at the Shanley Shack. Do you remember that Northwestern University? They had like this structure on campus they did shows at.
Oh
We
yeah.
played there in like 87 or 88. And I'm pretty sure I was like 15 and Eric was 14. And we had already been friends for a couple of years at that point. So Eric and I have on again, off again played in bands together since like maybe he was like 12 and I was 13.
Wow.
Or he was 13 and I was 14, but definitely in around there somewhere.
What would you constitute like the actual busy time of D4? Like how long was that?
The busy time for us was right up until anybody knew who we were, and then we decided to be lazy because we're fucking geniuses. We technically started in like 93, 94, and I'd say from like 95 to about say 2000, 2001, we toured often. I don't want to say we toured all the time because as you and I both know, by the late 90s, there were definitely people who just got out and lived on the road. And that was the thing. We were never that big. But we would definitely go out for a month plus a couple of times a year. It really wasn't until For the Triple Rock was built, which I believe is 2002, that we're kind of off the road. You know, if I could word it that way. You know, the bar itself opened in 98. And then Eric and Gretchen, they're married and they're the owners. They built the extension that was the venue you guys played at.
Mm-hmm.
When that opened up, it was kind of an event when we would go out and do an actual, like, we're going to go out for 3 weeks or we're going to go out for whatever, you know what I mean? Like that. And then as the years went on, that got whittled down to just sort of like 2-week spurts at a time, what have you. But there was also a lot of work to be done at the Triple Rock, to be honest with you. It really, you know, Eric was an owner. I worked in booking. Billy was one of the main bartenders. So there was hardly a time you could have gone to the Triple Rock that at least one of us, sometimes there might even be all three of us. Shit, Lane might even be sitting at the bar having a beer. So all four of us, honestly.
You've maintained the same group of people almost the whole length of the band. From the wiki I saw, there was a Sloan fella that was in for the first EP. A cool name, but what happened to that fella?
Well, that's the thing. Sloan actually didn't play on the first record. We put his name on it because we had recorded it, and then he joined the group. And really, it was because of the recording. Because you know, Eric doubled his guitar, liked how it sounded. He was like, "We should get a second guitarist." Sloan had been in a band called Bombsight, which is a great band up here, and they had just broken up. So we hit him up, and he joined the group. He only played a couple of local shows with us, and then we went on tour. And on tour that summer, we realized like it just wasn't working, and he wasn't really into it either. We were still friends, but strangely, I was housemates at the time with another band called Man Afraid, who was more of a straight up hardcore band. They were about to go on tour. They needed a second guitarist. So while we're on tour, this is one of those things where I was like, "Hey, dude, this isn't really working, but I know you're a fan of Man Afraid and you're buddies with them too. would you be into that? So then I just called my roommates and were like, do you guys want Sloan? And they were like, yeah. Now, if you can follow this, on that tour, we were touring with Scooby Dome, the band Billy was in before he was in D4. They also realized on that tour that they were going to break up at the end of that tour. So basically, by the end of that tour, Billy was already in D4 and Sloan was moving on to Man Afraid. Is that confusing too? I feel like everything I'm saying is just confusing and fucking.
No, I'm pretty thick and I got that. I got it.
To be honest with you, at that time in Minneapolis, shit was pretty incestuous anyway. I played bass in Man Afraid. After that, for about half a year at 1.2, Eric was in a band called Impetus Inner for a while that we did our first record label with. Well, really, they did it and we were part of it. It was like a collective. Everybody was sleeping with everybody. Let's just put it that way.
Now, Dillinger 4 seems like a really interesting band because it sounds like you had periods of really intense, busy, but then your records, and from interviews I've seen, you take a long time between records. So it's like 2 years, and then like 6 years. So you never know what's going on behind the scenes. You're probably together a lot, doing other things, running the bar. I was thinking about this earlier, that facing and talking to you is a bit daunting because I feel like Dillinger 4 isn't just a band, but like a world. Like each record feels like it's its own world, which is really impressive.
Yeah,
but yet you have a small catalog. I mean, relatively for how long you guys have known each other. So I'm just really interested in that. I feel like music is a passion, but it isn't your life alone. Does that make sense at all?
That was actually probably the only band rule that no, that isn't true. We actually pride ourselves. We've had a handful of rules we've gone by for a pretty long time, to tell the truth. But one of the original ones, and looking back on it, I don't even know why we came up with this, but this was a mantra from the mid-90s, was the band was never going to be our life. It had to be fun. And if we were having fun doing it, we were going to do it. I honestly haven't thought of it in years. I can't remember why we actually came up with this. We didn't want to do tours with bands we weren't into just because it was an opportunity. We didn't want to open up a show we wouldn't pay to go to. None of this shit was stuff we talked about at like the first practices. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we saw what was on the horizon. We were like, we must have this statement of purpose. It wasn't like that at all. These are just kind of things that came up in the first couple of years. What we didn't realize was how real shit we could get for certain members as years went on. Probably the biggest example within the group that most people don't know about is Lane, our drummer, who's a psychologist. And he's published, he's very successful in his field. But he obviously had medical school and everything. You know, basically around the same time that Eric and Gretchen opened the Triple Rock, that's when Lane's getting into his doctorate and everything. So you can imagine between those two, you know, like Eric owns this business property with employees and everything. And Lane over here is in med school and everything. I mean, obviously the band not only took a backseat, it was like in the trailer behind the van. I know I used to joke about it. There was one, I want to say it was like 2003 or something. I believe we did half a dozen shows total the whole year. And we didn't rehearse once. Not once. Like we would rehearse on our own. And then at sound check, we would go over stuff real quick. I wouldn't say I was happy with that, but that just was kind of how it had to work at the time. But yeah, that's why stuff like that would get kind of spaced out like that. And then obviously the more successful the Triple Rock got, as well as Lane's career, it got even trickier for us to like get out and tour or whatever, or even rehearse. There was a couple of years there where we would only get together to like learn and work on new songs. And then for shits and giggles, we would have a rehearsal every couple of months. So it'd be like, yeah, let's just crush some beers and just throw out song titles and just go through them all for a couple hours. So yeah, I mean, it was pretty unorthodox there for a long stretch.
I'm just going to jump all over because that's the way I feel like we should be doing this. I tried to really sort of indulge myself the last 2 days and listening to all the records. And one of the things is that you play a lot with melody, but there's no real like chorus verse sort of feel. So that's why I'm saying each record is like a world, because I'm not really listening to a song as much as this whole sort of experience of like and what I'm getting at is it's really intense. Like the playing is intense. Was there any focus in the studio as to how to play it? Because it seems really live. Like it feels fast and
Uh,
urgent. Is that something that you had to concentrate on in the studio, or is that just came naturally to the band?
I hate to say it, but as corny as it may sound, I think it must just come natural because I don't think we've ever really talked about that. In fact, if anything, there's been a couple of times I can think of over the years where, we've always recorded with the same guys. And the primary one is a guy named Dave Gardner, super old, really good friend of ours. And I know there's been a couple of times where Dave's been like, that sounded good. That was tight. It was also fast as fuck, way faster than it, kind of losing something there. And so, it's like you go down and actually slow it up a little bit. If you look at the root of what we were into, what we grew up listening to, it is rooted in a lot of like absolute pop punk, but also a lot of absolute hardcore. So it might just be the fusion of those two. You know what I mean? Because if you play hardcore in the pocket, it just sounds corny, right? You know what I mean? It just doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that just really came more natural. It's probably more, what we listened to coming up than any concentrated effort in the studio or conversation. There have definitely been parts where we made it noisy, things like that. Bury the vocals a little bit to make it a little weird. But again, that's also, inspiration we took from other stuff we like a lot.
I've heard bands that make me think of this, but your record seemed like the epitome of like organized chaos.
I don't know. I mean, I guess you can't see the forest from the trees, it's kind of.
Well, what me and Ben used to talk a lot about when we went in the studio is that we would always play. The idea was to play beyond our own talent. Like
Sure.
we wanted it. We didn't want. This is in the early. Then it got like Television City Dream got almost too specific and like too much time spent. But the original idea was that we didn't mind the messy as long as we were trying to play past our own abilities. Right. It gave it that sort of urgency that we were looking for. So I kind of feel like that in the band, but you guys seem a little bit more talented.
I'll take that compliment. I don't think it's true, but I'll take the compliment. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we've ever really talked about that kind of pushing it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of embarrassed as I sit here talking to you because I really don't know how many technical conversations we've ever had recording ever. if I'm honest, really, sounds in the studio, that is a thing for us because we do like it kind of noisy, when we can. Civil War isn't an especially noisy record though, but definitely like Situationists and Midwestern Songs in particular, those are noisy records on purpose, and actually Versus God is in its own way too. But yeah, I don't even know if we've ever had any sort of technical conversations about it like that, to tell you the truth. But, yeah.
Who decides the found? I didn't hear that. I want to hear it again.
We'll just chalk it up to luck of the draw,
Who, this was a thing that was going on I think in hardcore and punk in the 90s and the 80s, but you have a lot of like found audio, like sound bites on your records. Is there any one person that's in charge of that, or is that like a group deal? Or
well, I mean, I guess kind of me. Civil War was me and Billy, but it's not like with the other records, it's not like I just brought something and was like, this is where we're going to put this. I would run it by the guys and be like, here's the snippet. And I think this makes sense with this song. Are you cool with this? We didn't think about it at the time, but like, when we did our second 7-inch, The Kids Are All Dead, around that time we were touring fairly often. And I had this dictaphone I had found at the time because I was going to do this fanzine. So we went on the road and I just had this dictaphone with me all the time. Originally I had it because my idea was I thought it'd be funny to do a fanzine where it was no very serious interviews. It was just some super quick shit, like oh, is the guitarist from Christ over here half in the bag? Cool. I'm going to go interview him about what's his favorite Rockford Files episodes. You know what I mean? That was the idea. After a tour or two, I realized I didn't have anything like that. But what I did have was a lot of really cool, just sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Incidental audio, that was people we knew, people that were touring with us or, that lived at the house we were playing at or whatever. And so that's what we used on that set. Like, those are actually just my dictaphone. Those are all guys we know. And we really liked how that came out. And I remember we did have a talk then. We were like, we're going to do this with every record. This is going to be our thing. We're just going to record weird little snippets. We're going to incorporate it, and of course there's some inspirato there. Just off the top of my head, there's any number of hip hop records from the late 80s, early 90s. They used that. Jawbreaker used it, on Chesterfield King, the 12-inch, the Bivouac, the song Bivouac. Like, there were groups we knew that had used it in a really cool, creative way, or it was part of the song. And that was our ultimate goal. And somewhere along the lines, it just became more like snippets of obscure movies and stuff that people didn't really know. And every once in a while, it might be something I got on the dictaphone. But for the most part, I also collect records, and I collect a lot of really weird records. So a lot of them, like a lot of preachers, a lot of old political speeches, old commercials, the Boy Scouts serenade, the 1964 World's Fair, or what have you, and that's where a lot of the stuff came from too. A lot of the copyright free shit, and it was just fun.
Yeah, Patrick, like talking about creativity. I've been doing it my whole life because I'm both in theater and in music, and it's so difficult to try to get at the core because a lot of it is instinctual thing, and then there's things that are planned out. It's like a big mix of forethought and just intuition at the time. So I guess I feels like a lame question, but was there context to these audios that you did, or did they just feel right in the moment? Like, did you ever hem and haw over what sound bite went on a record, or did it just seem that seemed right?
Far and away, there's been more vetoed than ended up on a record. We kind of wavered on this as time went on, but there was definitely a time where I didn't want anything that was funny. You know what I mean? Like, I just thought that was kind of corny to have something on the record that was ha funny. I just didn't, that was someone else's trip. That wasn't ours. As I go through my head, I'm just trying to think of ones off the top of my head. I think they all correlate. Maybe some are more obvious than others, but they all served a purpose. I'll admit off the top of my head, the old graffiti sample, is that art? I'm not an art critic, but I can tell you this, it's a crime. Like that one? Maybe they didn't exactly have to do with the song, but it fit with the overall vibe of the record. You know what I mean? Like, it made sense. But in general, it tied in. This is funny that we're talking about the samples, and kudos to you, because this kind of question always comes up about the song titles. Because people are always like, because that's like the old adage is we just make up the song titles, they have nothing to do with the song, so that's kind of just a fuck you to. Yeah, no, they all kind of tie in. Sometimes it might be less obvious than other times.
I was going to get to that, but I wanted to try to find an interesting way because I figured that probably is talked about a lot. But I actually wondered whether, have you ever actually gotten a word from a song in the title?
Oh, wow. This is so funny because I brought this up to Eric a couple of times over the years. And I don't know if you know this song. It was on it. Remember Allied Records in the 90s?
Yeah.
He did probably the first really exciting thing that ever happened to us. He asked us to be on one of the comps that he did. It was called Invasion of the Indie Snatchers. And this would have been like 94, 95, somewhere in there. And we recorded a song for it. I had named it, Eric wrote the song. So I want that to be out there. Eric wrote all the music, he wrote all the lyrics. I didn't have shit to do with it. So I didn't have any say in it. Fully admit this right out the gate. And he had asked me what I wanted to name the song. And the song was written to somebody we had grown up with, that we had toured with. To make a really long story short, because he's still a good friend, but it was kind of one of those like, this scene didn't mean as much to you as it does to me kind of song that you write when you're 21 or whatever, you know. So I named the song We Slept on the Same Floors, right? Simple title. I can't remember how this happened, but Eric did the layout for the comp and he named the song Open and Shut, which is a phrase in the actual chorus of the song. And I got to admit, I was such a shitty baby about it for at least, I was like, I can't believe you named it Open and Shut. You say Open and Shut in the chorus. And Eric was like, yeah, that's called Open and fucking Shut. He was like, just saying that. And I was like, oh, that's so basic. You know, really embarrassed about it now. But I think that might have been the only, I hadn't really stopped and thought about it, but that might have been the only one. And I think everything else, yeah, everything else is a standalone. Because it was kind of fun, you know what I mean? It's just another, it's like a new color in the palette to use in the painting. You know what I mean? You can make the The other thing too that was kind of funny was we started that with the titles in the 90s because it was also kind of an inside joke to us because it was like, who gives a fuck what you call the song? No one's going to call the radio and request the song. You know what I mean? The odds of someone going to the record store and going, oh, I was just at this random party and I heard this song and the chorus goes like this and it was one of ours, that just seemed fucking absurd to us at the time. Like, who cares? The basic purpose of what a song title serves is obsolete in this field that we're in. That was what we thought, like 94, 95. And then you and I both know what was right around the corner from there. All of a sudden it was like, oh, fuck, maybe we should have put the chorus phrase in all of these song titles, man. Holy shit. But too little, too late.
Well, I don't know. It feels like, I feel like you have that sort of, I don't know, rebellious streak in you. I have a difficult time with the word rebellion because it's overused and it's sometimes being rebellious is just being the other side of the other problem. You know, it's not as good, but there is something, I don't know, artistically pleasing about being rebellious. But I can't help but think the thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to maybe it'll lead to you talking about it, is whether it was a guideline you set, but I wonder whether that deciding to estrange the title from the song led to this more of a unified feel in the record than each thing standing out on its own is how I view your records.
For lack of a better phrase, that's it. Like, if there was a recipe for the songs, that's a component. Just what you said. The idea of trying to make the song like a complete thought and maybe naming the song something unorthodox contributes to that. You know, that wasn't accidental. You know, I don't know if we would have articulated it like that back then, but I think that inkling was probably there. Yeah, because I mean, it wasn't accidental that we did it. So maybe to make it sort of more individual. Does that make any sense? Just, God, individual is not the phrase I'm looking for. I can't, special. All right, let's just paint with really big, broad strokes. The father of a 7-year-old is going to come out of me right now. Just to make it more special. You know what I mean? Each individual song. I mean, the other thing to say too, and this plays in with when you were talking about the time we spend between stuff, especially in those years, we threw away way more shit than we released, for sure. You know, I mean, if you had to do some basic math, I think we used to joke that, I mean, between Eric and I think we'd throw away a song and a half or 2 songs for every song we would play live. So I think anything that reached the point that we're actually giving it a name, maybe you want to sprinkle a little fairy dust on top of it, make it a little more special. I mean, it makes it sound so simplistic, but really that's as simplistic as it was. It also kind of plays into a thing too, now that I think about it. It really wasn't until the first album that we really kind of didn't think anybody gave that much shit about something like that. You know what I mean? Because we did 3 4-song EPs and a split before that. And by the time we did Midwestern Songs, there were people who were like, oh, well, the song titles, you know what I mean? Like, is it going to be like this again? And it was like, oh, I guess this is our thing. This is what we do.
Do you feel the band had any kind of statement overall?
No, not at all. No, you know, it was just kind of for the love of the game, I guess. And honestly, you know, we were just joking about being the last generation not using computers. I do think D4 might have been the last of the generation to start a band like us, where we kind of didn't have career goals on it. You know what I mean? And I'm not even saying that's criminal. I'm not even saying that's a bad thing. You know, I'm too old to pretend that I think that's a bad thing. But at the time, we just started the band to do a band. We literally went to shows 4 nights a week. You know, we loved this. We collected records. This is what we did. At that time, that's what you did. You did a zine, or you did shows, or you did a band. Everybody did something. We just happened to be band guys, you know? I mean, for fuck's sake, when we started, we were called the Ted Kennedys. You know, there was no grand mission statement of anything. You know? And the funny thing is, we were playing songs that ended up on the first 7. So it's not like we changed gears and took it more seriously at one point. We just woke up one day and realized Ted Kennedy's was kind of a stupid fucking name.
It's kind of funny that I asked you that question, because I ask a lot of broad questions because I like where broad questions lead to like conversation, but I'm kind of perplexed why I even asked that. Maybe it was because I did feel like you were like the last of a punk feel that sort of died off or something. I don't know.
I mean, it's kind of weird because to me, I've had conversations with people over the years where what they're asking about, sometimes it's almost like the pop punk person wants to know why we were never more pop punk, and the hardcore person wants to know why we ever fucked around with pop punk in the first place. It's kind of funny because we didn't do any of that intentionally at the time when we first started. You know, it was just literally a product of everything we were into. And that even has to do with the politics. It has to do with how the flyers and the records looked. That, you know, and it wasn't all bands. I mean, it was all sorts of pop culture mishmashed into that. Or how we spoke to the crowd. I mean, just even how we worded things. I don't remember us ever having like meet. You know, it's funny. I do remember when you asked earlier if there was any great plan with the band. I do remember us talking about how, you know, but I think everybody did this. I remember us having a meeting one time at a pizza place about how if we had the chance, we would run our business like Fugazi. That was a big thing. We thought it was so noble at the time, but it's funny because literally within years, I found out like every fucking band that formed in like 1993 was like, we're going to be like Fugazi. You know, they all late shows. We're never going to charge more than $5. We're going to book ourselves, no roadies. We're all going to live in the house together and do our own label or whatever. You know, like everybody said that. Everybody. Dudes who started hip hop crews said that, you know, metal bands said it. But yeah, that was the only time I can ever remember having a conversation that involved some sort of a mantra.
Those years of, what is it, like 95, 96, when pop punk, this is when Green Day sort of hit, everything was getting big. Bark Like a Dog came out, which you and I talked about, I think briefly when I met you.
I don't remember that if we talked about Bark Like a Dog. But if I'm honest, Bark Like a Dog was not a big Weasel record for me. So I don't know if I would have gotten into conversation with you about that. But it could have been. Who knows? That was a long time.
I wonder who it was. There was somebody from D4, and I didn't really know you.
Billy. Because Billy.
Maybe Bill.
Billy was either working that night. If he wasn't working that night, he was just at the show, but I know he was there. So yeah, that it might have been Billy you got in the conversation with about that. I liked Bark Like a Dog. It's just it wouldn't be in like my top 5.
Well, I'm the same way. It's not in my top either. But I think what I was talking to him about was, that makes sense because he is the guitarist. So he was talking about how he liked that sound of that guitar. And I said it was frustrating as hell because Ben walked out and I had to do both the guitars, and it was all this adamant, because they just came out of Riverdale. So it was this adamant downstroking on everything, but he couldn't do it. So I had to do it. And it was really frustrating. And he made me feel good because he said, well, it really paid off because it influenced me and stuff like that. So it felt good.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I should go back and check out Bark Like a Dog again. But I remember it was a tough sounding record. I remember that. Am I right on that? Yeah.
It's a what?
I remember it being kind of a tougher sounding record, wasn't it? Am I kind of?
It's a slower record, but it's more beefier, as in, like I said, it's much more produced. That was like sort of our lame attempt to try to do something a little bit more mainstream, but not really wanting to do it that way.
Totally. You know, I have to go back.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about labels. I feel like I learned more about labels talking to bands, and you're like another one that ended up on Fat, but you were on Hopeless
Yeah.
First. Or did you put out something yourselves on the EP? Because we were all doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, we did. When we first started actually drawing people around the Twin Cities, there was another band called Impetus Sinner. It was a hardcore band that we were really good friends with. And like we lived in the same neighborhood and everything. And then a couple of each of us from each band, if you can follow this, a couple of us from each band were also in another band called the Creepers. That was kind of more of like a sort of trashy garage punk thing. That was just a lot of fun. I never wrote a lyric. I was the singer, never wrote a lyric all the years, just made everything up off the top of my head. It was that kind of deal. And early on, our first 2 7-inches were on a label called Cerebellum, which was really Dillinger 4, Impetus Inner, and the Creepers. We all pooled money. We would have record assembling party, like get some beer and order some pizzas and everybody just folds records, that old bit. So yeah, that was the first 2 EPs we did were that. And then we did one with Mutant Pop. And it was while we were touring for the Mutant Pop 7-inch that Hopeless got in touch with us. Which was funny to me at the time because I thought Hopeless was just a straight up ska label. I didn't know. Looking back on it, I was pretty ill versed on West Coast stuff in general, if I'm honest. I didn't even know a lot of Fat bands at that time, to be honest with you. I was fully aware that there was this label called Fat that was huge, Epitaph. And I'm not going to pretend like I didn't know bands that were on those labels, but I didn't know a lot of them, And Hopeless, I really didn't know much about Hopeless. I wasn't super gung-ho about signing to Hopeless when they first contacted us, actually. It was Eric who was really the one who was like, look, I shot the breeze with Lewis, who is the head of Hopeless still to this day. And he was like, look, this dude is super, super cool. And he's a really, really good guy. And he's down to earth and he's talking our language. And, in so many words, basically Eric was like, look, maybe your favorite bands aren't on this label, but maybe that's not what we're looking for right now. Maybe we're just looking for somebody who's on our side, who's got distribution and isn't looking to rip kids off or us, whatever. Turned out to be right. Lewis is a great fucking dude. Still a wonderful guy.
What was the move to Fat? Was that just sort of just check out the scenery there, or what was?
This might be the first time any one of us says this out loud. And I'm gonna walk on eggshells here for a second because I am genuinely saying this with all the love in the world. All right. At a time where we were still touring fairly often, and I word it that way because by this point there are bands that are touring constantly. We never were that band, but we would go out a couple of times a year. And Versus God was out. Our second album with Hopeless was out, and that was our contract. It was 2 records. And we played a show in LA, and we hung out with the Hopeless dudes. They were great. The Hopeless dudes and ladies, I should say, because it was like everybody who worked there. All great. All of them were great. There had been a couple of bands we were good friends with who by this point either broke up or knew when they were going to break up, namely Scared of Chaka, the Selby Tigers, bands like that. And I'm just going to name names. I'm just going to throw it out there because, obviously it's 20 years later. Who gives a shit? But we had gotten demos or whatever from the Hopeless guys of some of their new signees, which included a band called Thrice and the band Avenged Sevenfold, both of which were like a completely different genre. And clearly now in retrospect, brilliant moves on Hopeless's part because either of those groups went on to sell way more than everything they'd ever done combined. I remember we were literally driving out of LA and listening to these CDRs or whatever, and just kind of being like, what are we doing? Like, this isn't, they're clearly going somewhere that we're never going to be at. We're not even interested in, you know what I mean? Aesthetically, sound wise, everything. We played SF and Fat got brought up. And I can't remember exactly how Fat got brought up, but it was brought up by somebody from Fat, like, hey, is your contract with Hopeless really up? Do you think you'd be interested in Fat? And to us, I mean, at that time, it was like, among other things, Swingin' Utters were like one of my favorite bands. So we were like, holy shit, like really? Like, do you think Fat would have us? Like, that kind of blew our mind. And that's kind of how that happened. And it all happened within like a week. I mean, honestly, it was really, really pretty quick. You know, Hopeless was going in another direction, and they full on did go that direction. And it did fucking great for them. Like I said, they were great dudes then. They're great dudes now.
When you moved to Fat, did you have a record in the works already? I know you guys work, well, I wouldn't say slow, because from the interviews I've seen, you procrastinate and then a lot of stuff comes quick, like lyrics and stuff. But did you have stuff ready when you moved to Fat?
Actually, a really fucking good question, because I almost immediately said no. I've joked about this for years. Eric and I we write the music for D4, and then all four of us arrange. But in our own way, Eric and I write all the time. Like, we haven't made a record now in, what is it, like 10 years or something, but we still write all the time. But you get something caught in your head and you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Then you sort of fuck around with it over a period of time. And then you kind of get the call up. It's like, hey, we're going to do another record. Are you going to have free time in the spring or whatever? And then it's like, okay, I got to tighten this up. I got to turn this into songs. And then we bounce it off each other and it kind of takes shape or whatever. But especially at that time, like I said, that's when we still toured fairly often. So I don't think we were conscientiously ever like, hey guys, I got a new song. Here's the lyrics and the bridge is like this. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that. It was just kind of more like, I have a couple of these choruses. I have a couple of these verses. I have this stanza in my head that's cool. Just this rhyming scheme that I like a lot. You know, that kind of thing. When it came within a couple of months of when we knew we'd be recording, then you start putting all those Voltrons together. Our song Double Whiskey Coke No Ice, I love telling people about this. We ditched that song. That song, the da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, like the intro, that was originally basically the whole song. Eric wrote it. And we played it at practice for fucking a long time, months and months and months. It never made it to a show. All of us were kind of irked by the song and we threw it away. And it was like so long later. I know I lived in one house and I was living in a different house when I brought the song back. And it was just because I had a riff that I liked, but I didn't have anything to go with it. And then I was like, oh, Eric had this thing from this song last year. Put that together. Like, basically what I'm getting at is Double Whiskey Coke No Ice was like 4 different songs we just put together, you know, and then the lyrics were all written in one shot. But we've kind of done that a lot over the years. In the early days when we would collaborate a lot more, there was even periods where it'd be like, I need a bridge, dude. You got anything that would work? Like, I'm doing this weird octave thing in this part. Do you got anything that would go with this? You know, I'd be like, oh. A couple of years ago, I had this fucking, you know, Slayer knockoff thing I did to check my tuning. Does this work? You know, that kind of shit. But
you know, Vapid and Weasel Ben were really good at that. I don't know. I mean, it was my band. I mean, me and Ben started it, but I would watch those two and the way they worked, that chemistry of someone just showed someone something. And then 3 months later, you know, Ben would bring it back and say, this is that thing you had. And then they'd add it together. It was kind of magic to watch those two.
Did you guys ever write like all together or even two people at the same time? Did you ever have a time that like you and Ben would literally sit on a couch and just write a song together? Like, you both have a guitar, you just write a song together?
The first 2 records are done that way. I was more of a writer then, like for the self-titled and Boogada. Hey Suburbia, I'm claimed as half the writer, even though Ben wrote it, but it's that vague territory of I was there and I think I played a rhythm thing and then he took it and then, yeah. So a lot of those first 2 records were ambiguous.
You got a credit.
Yeah, I got the credit. Yeah. One of the most classic songs ever from Screeching Weasel. I got my credit on there. But the Vapid and Ben I would say for Brain Hurts and Wiggle and a little bit of Anthem. Well, Anthem is when Ben sort of just took over and ran his way. But Vapid and Ben worked like that were great. And actually Wiggle was, I always say that's one of my favorite records only because of that experience. It was John Personality, it was in Vindictives, me, Panic, and Vapid. And Ben would come in with a song and then he was at the point where he was just tired of being in rehearsals. So he would just drop a song and then leave. Yeah, the 4 of us would just keep jamming. So half of Wiggle is just formulated from us Ben would come back a couple hours later and we'd say, oh, we have this jam that we were doing. And then we'd work it into a song. So the early days was a little bit more like that.
Since it's come up organically in conversation, I'm going to out myself that I am a Wiggle man. Wiggle is my number one, has been my number one since it came out. I mean, there's many Weasel records I love, but Wiggle, and it was weird because that was such an odd time because like you were talking about sounds and toughness and tightness. And I remember detractors. I remember when Wiggle was a new record. And I remember people kind of being like, it doesn't sound as good as My Brain Hurts. In my mind, I was like, are you fucking crazy? It's so much tougher. I was like, it's a fucking punk record, man. Like I remember thinking that at the time. But yeah, Wiggles in the handful of Weasel records I still go back to.
I think My Brain Hurts is the most solid, like song-wise, from song to song, it's more solid. But the sound is just washed. There's no sort of distinction between guitars and stuff to me on that. Whereas Wiggle was all about Johnny Personality was on bass. I was on this guitar. Vapor was, it really was about the instrumentation. I think one of the few, I think that was really about the instrumentation.
I think I even joked when I was younger that if somebody just asked me out of the blue, I'm going to check out the Screeching Weasel Band. What record should I check out? Be like, My Brain Hurts. But if you like this, come right back, and then I'm going to give you this one. You know what I mean? I love My Brain Hurts. I mean, I'm not even sweating that record at all, But no, I had asked about the songwriting part because that's one thing I'm actually kind of embarrassed of in my life is and Eric is the same way. We're terrible on that kind of collaboration. The idea that we're going to sit down face to face and we're going to write a song together. I can't do that with anybody. I've never done it in my life. Any band I've been in. But what I am great with is like, I've written this song, but I love you as a songwriter, so I'm going to play you this song, and I want you to tweak it. What are you hearing differently? What are you not really liking? Or vice versa. Someone comes to me and says the exact same thing. But I'm fascinated, and I'm envious even of people that have that kind of relationship. Would it be symbiotic? Can I even say that? To be able to sit down and have your tastes so fused that you could do that, like write a song together with someone else. I have to point out what I was talking about earlier is strictly music. I think you could count on one hand the songs Eric and I have collaborated with lyrically, ever, in every band we've ever been in together ever in our lives. That is definitely well, actually, that isn't true. I mean, there's tweakings, if you have the other guy something that you wrote to make it more natural, a phrasing for yourself. But that's minor editing. That's not even that big of a deal. But songwriting, like lyric writing, that's kind of hard to collaborate with someone else on, I think.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing sort of like what I'm sure you've been through with writing, where you have an editor you respect on like a lot, and maybe they tweak something and you can see the value in that. I could see that with someone else, but it's weird because when I think about it with D4, we've never really even done that with ourselves. Pretty much whatever lyrics we brought in, that's that.
Was there ever discussion of like conceptually what a record is going to be like, or once again, is that all intuitive and natural?
No, not ahead. It's kind of funny. There's another thing. I haven't really thought of this in a long time. We've never thought of that ahead of time. But our first album, Midwestern Songs of the Americas, I loved and love the sound of that record. I love the sound of that record. Love it. And about a year after that had been out, which was about a year before Versus God came out. So we were starting to talk about the next record, getting songs together. And I almost said exactly what Eric said, but I can't remember exactly what Eric said. But he had said something along the lines of like, this is the thing though, when we record this one, we really got to focus more on the sounds of the guitars where we have to tighten stuff up because Midwestern Songs is just noisy. It just sounds like a mess. He said something like that. And I remember like my heart was in my throat. Like I was like the Tasmanian devil. I was like, are you fucking nuts? Like, not only do we have to do that again, we have to do it every fucking time. That's it. That's the sound. That's the sound. And Eric was really bummed that I was that adamant. It wasn't that dramatic though. I don't want to blow it too out of proportion, but and then it was kind of funny because then we did Versus God. And if I'm honest, I know now it's a really good sounding record, but at the time I was kind of bummed because I really wanted something noisy like Midwestern songs, you know? And then Situations Comedy, the third record, is actually the fusion of both those.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
But aside from that conception, like having a conceptual conversation before we actually pieced a record together or wrote it or whatever, no, really nothing. Probably us being more on the same page. And we're very lucky in that. We probably didn't really have to discuss it because we're all kind of into the same shit.
Yeah, I wrote down when we were talking earlier, I wrote down Versus God because I was actually working on my mom's house with my brother. We're trying to rebond the two of us. So we're working on my mom's house. And I sort of walked home in a snowstorm like 2 hours and I listened to like three of your records. And when Versus God came on, I stopped like in my tracks and I was like, this right off the bat, it hit me hard. It's one of the ones I'll go back to and try to, because I think on the surface of it, Civil War like really pops out. But I think there's something about Versus God that I'm going to have to go back and try to understand what hit me because there's something about the way it felt.
Versus God is I love now. And I liked it a lot then. There was never a time I didn't like it. I feel like I'm kind of misrepresenting what I'm trying to say here.
It doesn't sound like it. So,
or the production of it, to be honest with you. But I think it's more within years, I'd go back and I'd be like, what the fuck was I thinking? This is like a great sounding record. Like, this is really cool. I will say that what would differentiate all three of the LPs from Civil War was that Civil War was definitely a like, okay, we are going to make a record in this time frame. So we're going to start practices on this time. This is when we're going to rehearse or whatever. Midwestern Songs, Versus God, and Situations Comedy, those are all still from a time when we rehearsed a couple of nights a week. You know, like we rehearsed all the time. And we would just beat shit into the fucking ground. Like every rehearsal, we would play every song, 3, 4, 5 times, you know? And that is something I hear on those records that, I mean, I'm still proud of Civil War. It's tight, it's cool, I'm not sweating it. But there's sort of a, you know, like when you know a song so well that you can start fucking with it, you know, like with the stage, like learn your lines so well that you can forget them, you know, that open. That's what those first 3 records are. I mean, those were shit, you know. I mean, I almost said like we could get shit faced and play them perfectly. We obviously proved that was not true all the time. We've gone back and played songs from Versus God years later that we hadn't played for years that I'm not going to lie, I've had to go on YouTube and look at footage of me from then to see what I'm playing. Because holy fuck, man, I haven't played anything like that in eons, you know?
Yeah, I did this recently. I did this. Well, I've been doing this for years now, but since I haven't been playing with Weasel and I always loved being on stage, and Ben and I always sort of disagreed about liking the tour and stuff. But I started traveling all around the world and playing with like Weasel fan bands, and they would invite me and they'd pay for it and I'd show them some songs. And I had realized that we stopped touring like after Anthem, that a lot of these songs that they would come to me, it's like, I don't think I've played the song more than once.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
We just started talking a little about drinking. And I saw an interview with Eric Funk where it says drinking was it wasn't like you were straight edge before, but something with D4 was a drinking band. And it comes up in your lyrics too. Is that a big part of the band, or not? And I don't even mean that in a judgmental way at all. I just am curious.
You know, I'll be the first one to admit that of all the members, even if you meant it in a judgmental way, I would just have to take that. I mean, I'm not proud of 100% of things I've done on stage or whatever. But at the same time, it's also, you know, we were very much a product of the environment that we came out of. And I'm not talking about alcoholism, so nobody worry about that. I'm not going to try to rationalize alcoholism or anything. But the Twin Cities was a drinking punk town, you know, at that time. It wasn't just us. We just happened to be the band in this genre that did this. But, you know, a lot of the bands that we played with at the time, I mean, these house shows that we do, I mean, they were proper parties, you know, I mean, just bottles of booze everywhere or whatever. I think I'm comfortable wording it this way. certain members in Dillinger 4 got the memo way quicker than other members of Dillinger 4 that perhaps the party should be saved for certain times. There was definitely a long time where, like, I mean, we would show up to a venue to play a show, and the first thing Billy and I would do, or Lane and I, or any mixture of us, would be just go find a bar in the neighborhood and just post up, hang around. And it's not like we rolled in and just started pounding shots. We would definitely hang around and have drinks, friends. After you do that for years, then it just becomes a thing, and you have fans of the band that are looking for you because they know you're around, hanging around somewhere. And that was cool. I loved it. I still love it. I love that happened. I had a lot of great experiences. But the problem is, it's also kind of a crapshoot. When you're kind of living like that, sometimes you wake up the next day on someone's floor and you're like, oh, fucking shit, I don't remember the end of the set. You know what I mean? I would say we are a drinking band, but I don't think anybody in the band wants it to be our thing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Civil War, the cover of the record was done by my friend John Grider, an amazing artist, stencil artist. The cover of Civil War that everybody knows now is multiple pieces he had done put together on canvas. Originally in the corner, there was also a portly gentleman with frazzled hair pouring a beer on his head with sunglasses. And when John first showed it to us, I was like, I don't want to be that guy. When we asked him to do art, we asked him to do his art. We were commissioning John Grider. We weren't just paying some guy to make the image we were asking for, right? So I was like, I don't want to be this guy, but can we just get rid of this dude? And he laughed, and he was like, fuck. He's like, I thought you guys would have a beef with the Penguins. And I was like, no, the Penguins. I mean, the name of the record is Civil War. You're going to bring up penguins, like one of the only animals that communicates with each other without using a voice? This plays in with the record. The problem is, like, I was like, this dude in the corner, he kind of plays in too, but it's not necessarily something I want to tout. I don't think anybody in the band does. Not that we're like necessarily ashamed of it or anything. It's a little too on the nose. If I wrote Double Whiskey Coke No Ice in 2009 and that ended up on Civil War, I don't know if it would have been called that. I don't know if I would have called the song that. You know what I mean? There's a song on that record called Fruity Pebbles. You want to get technical, that's a drinking song. It could have had a similar song title, and I knew that at the time, but I didn't want to call it, like, it just, I don't know. It's too over the top. That's just kind of way too on the nose. And actually, for a pretty long time now, we've actually been watching what we consume before we get on stage. It's way more of an ordeal now to be like, okay, before I'm going to get up, I'm going to have 2 quick shots and, nurse this beer or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the sweet spot. A couple of years ago, the fest in Gainesville, you guys have done the fest, right?
No, I haven't done the fest, but I was actually just looking at the footage of you doing the fest. I've done the Insubordination Fest, but I've never done the Gainesville.
Oh shit, really? I thought even in Blackout. Well, Tony, if you're out there, fucking get on this shit. It was funny, just a couple of years ago, we flew down, we did fest. And it was kind of a hurry up offense. I can't remember why. Maybe somebody had some family thing or whatever. So it was literally like a fly in the day before and fly out the next day. I don't know, just kind of getting ready to go get on stage or whatever. I was hanging around having drinks I went to have drinks with my friend Bill from the band The Belltones, who was living in Gainesville at the time. And I told him, I was like, it's kind of wild. Like, I feel great. I'm excited to play, but I just kind of don't feel like I want to do a couple of shots and jump on the crowd and flip off a cop or fucking whatever the fuck I'm supposed to do. I just kind of feel like I just want to get up and rock it. I just want to play a show. And, so Bill was like, well, what do you want from me? I'm not your fucking dad. You know what I mean? Like, do it. Like, fair enough. So I got up on stage and I just played all the songs. And I got off stage. I had text messages from friends that were like, are you okay? Are you all right? Is everything all right? I can't remember who, but I know somebody we know from Minnesota was because we played on this outdoor thing. Somebody we knew from Minnesota was an eye shot. And they were calling me. And this is right after we came off stage. I walked over and they were like, are you all right? Are you feeling okay? Do you need anything? And I was like, why am I getting these messages? Why are you saying this? And they were like, no, you just seem so bummed out on stage. And I was like, why did I seem bummed out? And the more people I talked to, it turned out the reason they all thought I was bummed out was because I wasn't just jibber jabbering and talking nonsense on a microphone and yelling at people and jumping on shit and taking my pants off or whatever. And I was like, man, I am the only dude I know that can get on stage and just play everything and stand there like a normal dude. And somehow that gets me on suicide watch. Didn't do anything. But you can also read the crowd sometimes too. You know what I mean? I mean, we know what's going on. You know, our mutual friend Paul Silver.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. I was gonna bring him up. Yeah.
We just played Paul's birthday last year. It was the last thing we did. It was the last show I went to, was playing Paul's birthday in San Diego. And you know, that was one of those ones, like, you know, I had some drinks, but I wasn't like partying. But then watching, I think Toy Guitar was right before us. Watching them, I'm just kind of looking around the crowd and I was like, what am I holding for? This is a fucking party. This isn't even really like a show. This is like a house party in a small club. And so it was just literally like, fuck this. I went back up to the bar. I was like, I'll have 2 double shots, James. You know, like it was a lot of fun. It's not like I just got loose.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like this, I don't know, relationship with you and funk has a beginning or an end. There hasn't been any kind of final nail in the coffin of Dillinger for, but do you guys think about records?
Oh yeah. Nobody is going to believe this, and you shouldn't. I'll preface this, but a year ago, I recorded just some riffs on, like, you know, voice memo or whatever the app is on my phone, just to send to Eric, because he had brought up that he had some things, and I think he was teaching himself, you know, GarageBand or Logic or something, mostly to fuck around by himself. But he had ended up with a couple of things where he was like, this is kind of D4 kind of shit. This is pretty cool. Like, you know, it's been a decade. Maybe we should start thinking about doing something else, you know? And so we had thrown songs at each other and we were really stoked. And then literally it was like COVID hit like a month later. I mean, we'll make another record. We just don't know when it's going to be.
It seems to me it's interesting because you've set up, like I said, in the way that you designed the band, that you said, like in a guideline, that life was a priority and the band is important, but it's not life itself. It sort of set itself up for, this isn't like a big comeback or anything. It's just you guys work on your own time. And when it happens, it happens. And I respect that, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, like, I've tried telling people over the years. If anything, you know what I regret? When we've taken these long breaks and we know we're going to be taking these breaks, but we still want to play. If someone wants us to come do something, we still want to go and do it. And we still get together and rehearse. You know, I mean, we're all still really good friends. Our practice space is right behind my house, you know? And so we'll get together and the guys will have some beers and we'll just, you know, play music together. And, you know, we'll go play shows every couple of months or whatever. Sometimes I do wish we had just said we broke up. You know what I mean? Like, when I look back on it, I'm like, if I had a time machine, I would go back to Dillinger 4 circa 2003 and be like, guys, look, instead of trying to, like, you know, defend yourselves and not look lazy, just tell them you broke up. Tell them, you know, like, fuck you, Eric Funk, you can swing from my nuts, man. Fuck this band. You know, you come back in a couple of years, it'll be a way bigger deal than if you just kind of like fuck around for a couple of years, you know. But who would have thunk it? Who would have known, you know?
Yeah. Well, we did. I mean, Weasel did that. We had 3 breakups, but I would call them hiatuses, because I knew Ben. I knew he would eventually start writing Weasel songs again and wanting that. So I always call them, we're just on hiatus.
There was also, you know, it's kind of funny because there was also a thing with you guys too, with Ben, with MRR. You know what I mean? Like, even if there was a break period, there would still be sort of like Weasel info would trickle down. You know what I mean? Like, you know,
yeah,
something was going on. There's something to be said for that. I don't know if you know him at all or not, but a really good old friend of mine is Ryan from the band Off With Their Heads. And I've told him over the years, he does a podcast, and I told him it has reminded me of what, like, Ben Weasel's column was to Screeching Weasel, Ryan doing his podcast. Because it's kind of like, if Off With Their Heads is on a break for like a hot minute, Ryan will still be talking about that weekly on his podcast. You know, there's like a way to check in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, it comes up a lot in my recent podcast of this audience perception compared to like what it is inside. And I guess the podcast help sort of fill in those spaces, because things could seem like forever. Like what I was using before is, like, a lot of times an audience thinks like a band comes out of nowhere, but you didn't know that they were a band for 5 years touring and throwing away songs all that time beforehand. So it's weird that the timeline of a band itself is different from the perception of the band.
For sure. Yeah, I had a period around 2005, I had kind of realized that because of Lane's profession and the situation with the Triple Rock, that we as a group wouldn't be touring a bunch. Around this time, I joined the Arrivals in Chicago. A member had left, who was actually a friend of mine too. And originally, I only joined them to play on a record. I was just like, hey, if you need a bass player to fill in to record this record, I can do that. And then 2 years later, I was like, oh, I guess I'm in the band now, And then I also was playing bass for a friend of mine named Sean. He had a group called Sha Na Na, not Sha Na Na, but Sean and Na Na. I would play bass for him. And then I also joined another group called the Fuck Yeahs that have been around for years up here that I was just a big fan of, just really just trashy 2-chord, catchy, sort of garagey, pop punky stuff. The whole point, we wrote every song in 2 minutes. You couldn't overthink it. And after a couple of years, it was funny because I'd bump into people and I'd be like, why is D4 so lazy? Why are you guys so lazy? I'd be like, why am I so lazy? I just got done playing shows with the Fuck Yeahs. I just put out a second album with Sha Na Na. Arrivals are about to go in to record another album, which would be the second one I played on with them. You know what I mean? It was like, I'm doing other shit. You just don't know about the other shit. And it's funny because a lot of times with bands, especially nowadays, I find out, like, if there's a band I think is being lazy, you can go on Discogs, look up the members, and you'll be like, oh, fuck, this guy's in like 3 other bands. Or like, oh, shit, she does like solo stuff that she just throws on Bandcamp. And then on the flip side, it always cracks me up because then there's bands that are considered like working super hard. And it's like, man, these motherfuckers are just checking Instagram on their smartphones in a van for 8 hours. And not to belittle anybody, you know what I mean? Grinding's grinding, man. I fucking get it. It's always kind of funny to me when it's like you find out somebody owns and manages like $1 million business, but since their punk band didn't put a record out in 3 years, they're lazy.
I didn't really have to deal with this much because I was in hyper mode, but there was a time where I was doing tours, writing a play while I was on that tour. Then I would come back and stage that play.
That's unfathomable.
And then I would leave again and then write. It was a pattern for a few years where I just didn't sleep much.
I heard about that years ago, and I can tell you now to your digital face. I remember reading that about you working on a play on tour. At least there was one in particular. I don't know if you did this several times, but I had years when we were actively touring, I kept a journal. It was kind of a big deal to me. And I even had this little, they had these novelty little Polaroids where they'd make a picture maybe 2 or 3 times the size of a stamp. And so I had these journals that I'd keep, and I would take pictures wherever I was, and I put them on there. And man, I could kill another hour with you telling nightmare stories of trying to find somewhere to just get away to collect my thoughts and write this page, just one page, and then, place this photo on that. And when I found out about you working on a play, I was like, are you fucking mental? Where the fuck could you possibly be going to work on a play? Like I couldn't even write down literal thoughts I was having, much less get creative juices going on to like create, character thoughts and keep them consistent within a plot line. Hats off to you. But yeah,
well, thank you. I think working in a band actually sort of helped me with plays too, because they're I brought in like a really strong structure to a play, but you have to be willing enough to especially when you're creating a new work, you let the actors, once you hear them talk, it sort of alters how you work with it. So it became easier for me to really hone a structure because I would get the foundation down and then I would use the actors to help like finesse it.
Well, I guess I never even thought about that approach, but it totally makes sense. Huh.
Yeah. The difficult one is like, I have novels out. That is probably the hardest thing I've ever done, is writing a novel.
I can't imagine. I cannot. I mean, it takes everything I have to sit down and write a song's worth of lyrics. I can't imagine. Hats off.
Yeah. It's the continuous working on something, not knowing what the response is, being in a theater company that performs every week, and I do improv, and then I was in a band, you kind of almost get immediate understanding of what your audience thinks of what you're doing. But with a novel, you don't have a faintest clue.
Maybe this is just me, but when I have met people that have written books that I've read, I almost have a weird hesitation to bring it up to them. It's one thing to tell somebody, hey, you wrote that song and I like that song a lot. Cool. I shake your hand. I walk away. If you were to say, hey, you wrote that novel I like a lot. You wrote that collection of stories that I like a lot. that begs a conversation, kind of, but music doesn't.
I want to ask this strange question that I've just came up with now. It's not even really a question. It's like I feel like just the way that you talked about looking at Eric's lyrics or your songs, and then coming up with titles, you have like a strong artistic flair. Even though even in the punk world, that might have been a weird thing to say, to call yourself an artist. But do you consider yourself an artist?
Oh, holy shit! This is so funny because I just this is I had a an ongoing conversation with multiple friends just a couple of years ago about exactly this. Um, I'm almost going to kind of throw out a shout out to my friend Seagull and my friend Ian from the band Japanther. We had an ongoing conversation about this for a couple of months. Now I do. And I've realized I have a lot of friends who never in a million years would consider themselves an artist, that I would consider them artists as well. Just in the sense that, like, if you give some thought to something that you created, that is art. And if you made that, you are an artist, whether it's valued by others or not, it's there. You know what I mean? But that being said, I don't, the art I've been a part of, that I'm proud of, that I've been a part of in my life, I wouldn't know how to like sell that or project that. Does that make any sense? I don't even know if that necessarily plays in with art anyway.
Well, I let me say what I was thinking, and this is because I deal with a lot of artists, both in theater and in music, and there's something about I'm calling art the being able to break from literalness into metaphor or abstraction. And I think just your using of titles that don't really, don't have anything to do with the song, but resonate in some way is pure artist. Like I feel like whether you know it or not, or intuitively, or it, or purposely, you sort of radiate that sort of idea. You add abstraction to literal thought. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, and I really appreciate it too. I think that's a huge compliment. But but then again, it's kind of on the flip side. It is a weird thing because I don't know. Not even just me. I don't want to just pin this on me, but I don't know if me or a lot of people I've known necessarily were like, I'm going to make art. I'm an artist. You know what I mean? And then they just made something later when you look back on it, you're like, wow, shit, that was a really cool, complete thought, you know? Yeah, I don't know. This is kind of a heavy arc we kind of just turned on, because I wouldn't go around calling myself an artist, even though I just did like 5 minutes ago. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it really kind of depends on what somebody thinks art is. But I know I've intentionally created things with other people for the joy of us and people we want to share it to, who we think we're like-minded. And I don't know if that is an art, then fuck you. You know what I mean? I guess.
Yeah. I call it art. I mean, this is more specific, but I have this rule that I made, and it's more about the media than the art itself. But I am not something until I've done 3 of them. Like, I wasn't a playwright until I did 3 plays. I wasn't a musician until I did 3 records. I'm still not a novelist. I've only done 2.
I love that. I love that. I had, for a long time in the 90s, I think a lot of bands joked about this, but we used to joke about how, I can't even remember what our rule was now. If Billy were here, he'd remember. I think it was a tour was 2 weeks plus. Anything short of that was just a trip. So you couldn't tell somebody you're in a touring band if you were from the Twin Cities and you played like Milwaukee and Chicago, and then you came home. That wasn't a fucking tour. Even if you played like, maybe it was a week plus was a tour. Because I remember that really did kind of ruffle my feathers when people would be like, oh, we're going on tour. Oh, where are you going? We have 2 shows in Iowa, and we're playing Madison. That's not a fucking tour, man. I might agree with you on that, because it would rid it of the novelty too. Like you have your friend who kind of learns like one song on the guitar. That doesn't really make you a guitarist. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a fucking snob too.
I would always refuse to take a label. I think it was my punk aspect of me. It was like,
Sure.
I didn't want to form a theater company, even though I used the same actors all the time over and over again. I just didn't like titles like that. But then eventually I was like, okay, if I do 3 of something, then I can give that I could admit that I do that thing. So that was kind of my rule.
It's funny. There was a fairly long time that if I had to name the members of the band, like we were doing an interview or something, if I had to name the members of the band, I would say Eric was a guitarist and a singer, and I was the bass player vocalist. And I remember Lane brought it up to me. There was a house called the Castle Grayskull in Ohio. It was sort of like DIY punk house. We were playing there one night. And I don't know why this stands out to me. I don't know why I remember this. But I remember Lane brought it up to me one night where he was like, why do you always say Eric is a singer? You always refer to yourself as a vocalist. And I was like, because I am. Because I thought about it at the time, and I was like, if someone invites Eric on stage to sing their song with them, he can do that. I can't do that. But I can write a song and sing it for you. And there's a difference there. Like, I'm not a singer. I don't know how to sing. It's kind of like how I have a bass. I can write a song on the bass and I can play it for you, and hopefully you enjoy it. And people have enjoyed songs I've written. But I can't just get up on stage and jam with somebody. I'm not that person. You know what I mean?
I love that you brought that up at the end here, because I did listen to the differences of your voices, and I got from what you said, that's how I kind of feel. Like he is a singer, and you have like more of a gritty, here are the words, here's the melody sort of voice. And I really like that. But the way that you explained it, I think it's perfect. You are a vocalist. He is a singer.
I have to thank you. You have this is my first podcast. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for doing it. It's way overdue. We should have been friends. This is one of the reasons I started doing the podcast like 7 or 8 years ago, is because I was in the scene, but I was always busy at every show, you know, like we were like business guys, and I didn't get to meet all the people that I was my fellow musicians. So kind of this podcast is me saying, this is who I am. Who are you? So I'm glad that we got to meet this way.
This is great. And I do have to tell you, it's very funny, because I did bring up the night. I don't know if you remember, because I don't know if I said it exactly to you, but Even in Blackouts, I kind of never really have understood why Even in Blackouts was called a pop punk band, because I have always thought Even in Blackouts had way more to do with sort of like C86, sort of pre-Britpop in the 80s than anything that do you know what I'm talking about? Like the Flatmates and stuff like that? Are you a fan of any of that kind of stuff?
No, I don't know. I'll look it up. I never called it a punk band. I never called it a pop punk band, because I actually don't even like writing pop punk songs. I leave that to Vapid and Ben, who are like masters at it.
Totally.
I was a punk, and I'm a punk. I'll always be a punk. So if I'm in a band, it's a punk band. So I might have hurt my own band in that way. Like we probably should have been in the alternative rock scene, but I loved the punk world, so that's what I did.
Yeah, that was one of the things I brought up when pop punk had got huge, and all of a sudden there were like commercial pop punk bands that were massive right out the gate, especially late 90s, early 2000s. And at the time, I would tell people, I'd be like, look, there's people who play punk music, and then there's punks who play music, and they're not always the same.
All right, Patrick, it was so great to meet and talk to you. So thank you very much.
Well, right on, John. Thanks, man. I'll see you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Forgive me, for a second I thought we were eye to eye. My mistake, I shouldn't have faked it, and now it's cheers to a waste of time. I don't remember asking your permission to have my own goddamn opinion. And if this is how it goes in all of your shows, please point me to the exit. What a circus of clowns we are. Politicians could learn some tricks here. It's hard to see past all the stars. Please point me to the beer. This routine's back on the rise. Drop banana, cut it down to size. Check out a new dance. I call it the walk away. Walk away. Walk away. Walk away. Since when did
If you have made it to the end, you have just got done listening to D4 equals putting the F back in art on the album Situationist Comedy, put out on Fat Records in 2002. Thank you for making it this far and to listening to these lo-fi interviews. I enjoy doing them immensely. And once again, I'm going to say, please visit our www.jugheadsbasementpodcast.com site. And there's a button there where you can become a Patreon for $2 or $4 or $10. You get some extra gifts and some extra unedited material. And I do these weekly or bi-weekly videos that talk about what's going on, and I can answer any of your questions that you leave in the comments. And that is available only for Patreon members. And I understand if you can't do that. There's so many podcasts out there, and we only have so much money, and we only have so much stimulus checks to use on such things. You can also, and I would advise to do this, please, if you're internet savvy at all, share the podcast with your friends or enemies, and most definitely write a review at whatever pod area you get this podcast. Up next, I don't know who I'm interviewing yet, but on the Polycephaloporia, we will have Daryl Wilson from Boll Weevils as a doctor, which he is in real life. So I thought that would be a good part for him. Take in all of the Polycephaloporia episodes and wear headphones. I really love doing them. They're quite an adventure, and they take a lot of writing and a lot of editing, and my actors do a bang-up job on it too. So please appreciate it, and then appreciate them. That's it. Goodbye, everybody. Be careful out there.